Islamist groups from northern Nigeria have kidnapped a group of young girls, and they are either using them as slaves or they are selling them off for marriage. And this is a really scary story, especially considering the fact that they're going into schools right before these girls are supposed to take tests, and they're literally kidnapping them and taking them away. Now, there are some reports that some of the girls were taken out of the country to neighboring countries, so there isn't real confirmation on that. That is an allegation at this point. But people that are living in the area right now are furious with the military, and they're furious with the government because they feel like they are not doing enough, and they're underestimating the number of girls that were actually kidnapped from school. Now, for those of you who are unaware of this group, they're known as Boko Haram, and again, they're Islamists. And we do have a video that explains a little more about them, so let's go ahead and go to that. To give you more details on the recent kidnappings, Borno officials have said 129 girls were kidnapped when gunmen stormed the school after sundown on April 14th and forced the students, who are between 12 and 17 years old, onto a convoy of trucks. Officials said 52 have since escaped. Now, there is a little bit of disagreement as to how many girls were kidnapped, which is ridiculous. I mean, how do you have any disagreement about that? Locals, including the school's principal, have rejected those numbers, insisting that 230 students were snatched and that 187 are still being held hostage. And again, this group, they're very much against enlightenment. And what I find so interesting is they're fundamentalists, right? They're very religious. And for some reason, they think that it's perfectly moral and it's perfectly fine to kidnap young girls and use them as slaves. And their argument is, hey, in the time of war, if you kidnap young women as slaves, it's absolutely okay to have sex with them. That's their justification for doing what they're doing.
And Western education is dangerous.
Right.
Not that, Iron Age philosophy, but Western education. We've been talking sporadically about Boko Haram on the main show since, I believe, like November. I think we started covering some of their stories. I remember reading about they locked all the doors on a female school and set it on fire. Eventually, some of the girls got out through windows, but they had guys in the surrounding area waiting for them. Like, this is an awful, awful group. And one of the reasons I'm glad we're covering this is because Americans don't often get sort of exposed to this information. Not that there's anything that we can do about it. I mean, a higher percentage of Americans responded that the U.S. foreign policy intervention should decrease since right after 9/11. Like, people don't want to get involved, and I'm not saying that it's our role to get involved, but it's absolutely horrendous that this is going on. It's a combination of like out of control religion with an effectively powerless state. I mean, regular people are having to go out and try to look for these girls. They don't even know what country they're in necessarily.
Yeah, so the frustration comes from a lot of these people, a lot of these parents of these girls that are frustrated by the way the government is handling finding them, or I feel like they think there's a lack of motivation in doing so. And one of the reasons being, these groups have accumulated so much power now, stretching into multiple countries. They think some of the girls were sold into slave marriages, kind of, into Chad and Cameroon. So, and to stretch this far, now they're asking their government to ask for other entities to help. And why not? I mean, we talk about how there's, again, I don't know our relations with Nigeria, what kind of requirements we have to help them with type things, but human rights violations are happening all over the world. We always know this, but the level of which we hear about it is low until, I mean, okay, we talked about not we necessarily, but the Malaysian airline was talked about still, yeah. Right? So it's one of those things, so when I heard one report, they said, and the one American on board, I said, the entire flight of people are humans. Yeah. We're worried about the one American on board. Yeah, we should be worried about all of them. So it's like people who are reporting these things need to have some connection to, well, there was one American girl at this school in Nigeria that was snatched out. Now should we care? So it's like we need a hook to make us give a shit.
Take like 10% of the resources and technology and planes that are currently searching for that plane. You can still do round-the-clock coverage looking with futility for that plane, but put a little bit into it. And I understand, like CNN, so they went after the plane, then they went after the ferry. They're very vehicle-driven. Some of these girls were put on a bus. Isn't that enough of a hook for you, CNN, to start looking for them?
I know. The lack of coverage that this story is getting is really depressing. And I do want to thank OpposingViews.com and RawStory.com because they did do a great job covering this story and bringing some attention to it. The one other point that I do want to make about this is something that you see time and time again when it comes to fundamentalists, this opposition to education and the opposition to enlightenment. Oftentimes, the reason why they're not in favor of that is because if you're educated, you will question their authority, you will question their beliefs, and they're not secure in their own beliefs. If they were really secure in their own beliefs, they would be fine with education. The reason why they think Western education and enlightenment is a bad thing is because it gives people power. Knowledge is power, they don't like it, and it's just another example of them fighting against it.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people will grow up in this, and then you're indoctrinated with this misinformation, and you're in this bubble and you believe what the world really is. Now, of course, I don't want to make a direct comparison, but we see some groups in our own country that say that damn education system, they're indoctrinating our kids and they're telling them to not think about the real meaning of life is to follow God and stop thinking about any of that math, science, any of that bullshit that they're talking about. And it's dangerous. It's dangerous to do that. If you want to eliminate people's knowledge and what they can actually experience in the world, it sounds like you're trying to take them in, and it's scary.